This is a video from the topic B5, looking at hormones in human reproduction. There's two glands involved in the menstrual cycle. We've got the pituitary gland in the brain, and we've got the ovaries. As we've talked about in the endocrine video, the pituitary gland, we could abbreviate it to PG. We won't do that in the exam, but it's just to help remind us that the hormones that are abbreviated to letters all come from the pituitary gland. So the first thing that happens in the menstrual cycle, the pituitary gland releases FSH. You can just remember this and write it in the exam as FSH. It's quite useful to know that it's called the follicle stimulating hormone, because we're born with all of the follicles that we're going to have, and each month FSH takes one of those follicles and grows it, matures it into an egg. So the FSH from the pituitary gland travels in the blood to the ovaries, where it matures an egg. The next thing that happens is that estrogen prepares the lining of the uterus. So we've matured an egg, it's ready to go. We need to find somewhere to cushion it, to put it as it leaves the ovaries, and this is the uterus, and it will embed in that lining of the uterus. Okay, so the estrogen from the ovaries, we're looking at word ovaries, word estrogen, prepares the lining. If you're doing the higher paper, you'll also need to know that estrogen stops FSH. So if we've matured an egg and we've prepared the lining, we don't actually need any more eggs to be matured. So estrogen, the arrow going up to the top there, is to stop FSH. It also, when it goes back up to the pituitary gland, begins the release of LH. Now, LH is called luteinizing hormone. Again, you don't need to remember that, it's just remember it as LH. This is the third hormone, again, letters, so therefore coming from the pituitary gland. This travels in the blood, goes to the ovaries, and I think of this as the LH is leave the house, okay? So this is where the egg is released from the ovaries. So we've matured the egg, we've prepared the lining, and now we're releasing the egg. Now, if that egg gets fertilised, it will be fertilised in the oviduct. If it doesn't get fertilised, that lining of the uterus breaks down, which we call the period, and the whole cycle begins again. However, if it is fertilised, the sperm will swim all the way up to the oviduct, fertilise the egg. Okay, so the fused egg that we now call the embryo will embed into that uterus lining that was created by the estrogen, and the fourth hormone is released, progesterone, from the ovaries. But that progesterone is only released if the egg is fertilised. This has two jobs. One, maintains the lining to stop the period from happening, to keep that fleshy lining of the uterus for the embryo to implant into. And you see the arrow again, if you're higher, you see the arrow that goes to the top, going back to the pituitary. That's doing the same job as the estrogen does there, and it's stopping FSH. It's stopping any more eggs maturing, because once one embryo is growing in the uterus, we don't want any more to join it. Okay, so it stops the FSH, so it puts a stop to the cycle while that fetus is growing. So to look at that in summary, we start off with the pituitary gland, PG, that's releasing FSH, which matures the egg. Then, once we've got a mature egg, we need to create a nice place for it to go. Estrogen prepares the lining. Estrogen also stops FSH, to stop any more eggs maturing. Then the pituitary gland releases the LH, which releases the egg from the ovaries. Again, all these hormones are travelling in the blood. If it's not fertilised, cycle begins again. If it is fertilised and becomes an embryo, the progesterone maintains the lining, and it finally stops FSH. Hope you found that useful. Thank you.